She promised a powerful release, and boy, did she deliver. The pressure in that cab just kept building all night. Every time I thought we'd hit the limit, she found a way to turn up the heat. It got so intense, so damn hot in there, I thought the windows would crack. You can't handle that kind of fire for long. Sooner or later, someone's gonna get burned. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the parking lot of VFW Post 724 into a black mirror. I was parked across the street, engine idling low, just killing the last 2 hours before my pickup time in Springfield. Killing time is 90% of this job. The other 10 is paperwork and try not to plow through a four-wheeler that's decided to brake check 70,000 pounds of refrigerated pork. My cab is my castle, my office, and my waiting room. Tonight, it was just a warm, dry box in a world that had sprung a leak. That's when I saw her, a frantic shape darting between the halos of the streetlights. She made a beeline for my rig, not like a moth to a flame, but like a fox running for cover. I tensed up. You never know what you're going to get knocking on your door after dark, especially in a town this small. Usually it's nothing. Sometimes it's trouble. A sharp, desperate rap on my passenger side window. Not cop knock. Too hurried. I leaned over, hit the switch, and the window hissed down a few inches. Cold, wet air blasted in. She was plastered to the side of my Kenworth, rain dripping from her hair, her face illuminated in the green glow of my dash. She wasn't dressed for the business, not really. Decent coat, looked expensive before it got soaked. But her eyes had that unmistakable look, a frantic, cornered energy. I'd seen 100 times from Laredo to Bangor. It's the universal look of someone whose plan has just gone completely sideways. Please, she said, her voice tight, try to squeeze through the small opening. I need help. I just need 1 hour. A secure, a soundproof location. My left eyebrow went up. Secure and soundproofed. Well now, we're not using the simple words tonight, are we? This wasn't the usual, hey driver, looking for a good time? This was the corporate retreat version. 1 hour, she repeated, leaning closer. I could smell expensive, rain-washed perfume. I promise a powerful release. It's all I need. I took a slow drag from my cigarette, letting the smoke curl out into the rain. A powerful release. She had the sales pitch down. I'll give her that. Direct. No ambiguity. This wasn't some strung-out lot lizard looking for $20. This was the premium service. The kind you pay for with a credit card, not crumpled bills. On location, though, the VFW hall. Maybe she was going for the patriotic girl-next-door angle. It's a niche market, I suppose. I flicked the ash off my cigarette. The company policy manual has a whole section on unauthorized passengers. A whole section I hadn't read in 15 years. I gave her my best bored and unimpressed stare. Get in. The click of the door unlocking was the only sound. She practically fell inside, pulling the heavy door shut behind her with a solid thump. The cab was suddenly smaller, filled with the scent of her and the cold night. I hit the lock button on my door panel. A definitive clack. She climbed in, slammed the door, and I hit the lock. Just like that, the contract was signed. All that was left was to haggle over the fine print. She sat there for a moment, just breathing. Water dripped from her hair onto the rubber floor mat. A deep, theatrical sigh shuddered through her. Oh, thank God. Thank you. You have no idea what I've just been through. I was about to completely combust out there. Just spontaneously combust from the sheer pressure. Combust, huh? I thought, watching her from the corner of my eye. Keeping it classy. My internal checklist kept ticking. Vocabulary, A+. Professionalism, TBD. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel, playing it cool. The first rule of any negotiation is you let the other party show their hand first. The hostility, the ignorance, it was just unbearable, she went on, starting to wrestle with her wet coat in the confined space. An elbow jabbed the dashboard, a shoulder bumped the gear shift. To me, it looked like a clumsy, unpracticed striptease. I just had to find an outlet, you know? A place to channel this energy before it consumed me. Outlet. Channel the energy. Got it. The corporate buzzwords were coming thick and fast now. She was probably used to dealing with traveling salesmen, guys who spent all day in seminars about synergy and paradigm shifts. The coat finally came off, a dark, damp heap she tossed back into my sleeper. She was wearing a silk blouse underneath. Also damp. It clung. I made a mental note not to turn the heat up too high, for her sake. Then she kicked off her heels with a little groan of relief, tucking her feet up underneath her on the seat. These things are instruments of torture, designed by a man, obviously. She leaned her head back against the headrest, closed her eyes, and then, with a soft whirring sound, reclined the passenger seat all the way back. And there it was, the signal, in the complex, unspoken language of the road. That's the equivalent of a formal invitation engraved on ivory stock. The seat goes back, the deal goes forward. You don't do business on Main Street. Not with the VFW's lights painting the windows. It's just bad form. There's an abandoned industrial park about 2 miles up the road. Quiet. Private. Perfect for closing a deal. I stubbed out my cigarette, the decision made. The big Cummins engine rumbled to life. The air brakes hissed, and I pulled the rig away from the curb, the wipers slapping a steady rhythm against the rain. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice lazy, her eyes still closed. I glanced over at her, lying there like she owned the place. A small, cynical smile touched my lips. "Just finding a better parking spot," I said, my voice low and even. "Someplace where we can take care of business without being disturbed." I pulled the Kenworth into the shadow of a long-abandoned warehouse, its windows like vacant eyes staring out into the rain-swept darkness. Perfect. Not a single light for a quarter mile in any direction. I killed the engine. The deep diesel rumble died, leaving only the sound of rain drumming on the fiberglass roof, a hypnotic, steady beat. The cab felt intensely private now, a world of its own. I let the silence hang for a moment, a professional courtesy. Then, I turned to her. "All right," I said, my voice a low rumble in the quiet cab. "An hour is an hour. Let's talk about the toll." Her eyes snapped open, but the look in them wasn't sultry or inviting. It was electric, a kind of wild, righteous fury that made the hairs on my arms stand up. She sat bolt upright, the reclined seat groaning in protest. The lazy, post-ordeal act was gone, replaced by a woman who looked like she was about to lead a cavalry charge. "The toll?" she repeated, her voice sharp and ringing with indignation. "The toll is being paid by the maddened people of the Mesopotamian marshes. Their entire ancient ecosystem, a literal cradle of civilization, is being systematically desiccated by upstream Turkish dam projects that fly in the face of the Ramsar Convention on wetlands of international importance. That's the toll, and not a single person on that Philistine town council wanted to hear it." I just stared. The words hit me like a bag of wet cement. Mesopotamian, marshes, Ramsar Convention. My brain, which had been smoothly processing a simple, age-old transaction, slammed to a dead stop. It was like trying to run a diesel engine on perfume. The gears just wouldn't mesh. I frantically searched her words for a hidden meaning, a code, some kind of elaborate role-play scenario. Upstream Turkish dam projects. Was that a euphemism? A really, really specific one? She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring straight ahead, through the rain-streaked windshield, at the dark, looming shape of the warehouse. Her hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists in her lap. "They called security," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "Security? A man named Gary with a gravy stain on his tie. He escorted me out for disrupting the public forum." I wasn't disrupting, I was educating. My entire internal framework for this situation collapsed into dust. The mental flowchart I'd been using for 20 years, the one with arrows pointing from desperate look to vague offer to cash on the dash, had just been shredded. This wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a transaction. My mental map of the world had 3 categories: cops, customers, and crazies. And I had a horrifying suspicion I'd just put this woman in the wrong damn file. She didn't need any prompting from me. The floodgates were open. I just sat there behind the wheel, a captive audience of one, as the whole pathetic story poured out of her. "I had the floor for the public commentary period," she began, her voice taking on the cadence of a prosecutor laying out an airtight case. 3 minutes. That's all they give you. 3 minutes to summarize a geopolitical crisis spanning 3 decades and 2 river systems. It's an insult. So, naturally, I had to be efficient. My brain was still trying to reboot. Geopolitical crisis. River systems. In a town hall where the biggest debate last month was whether to fund a new scoreboard for the high school football team. I started with a powerful visual aid, she continued, gesturing with her hands as if holding a large poster. A satellite image showing the delta's degradation between 1984 and today. Stark. Undeniable. But Mayor Thompson, this man who thinks foreign policy is deciding which Canadian beer to serve at the town picnic. He cuts me off after 45 seconds. Says it's not germane to the municipal budget. Can you believe the nerve? Yeah, actually my inner monologue grumbled I can. So I had to interrupt his little filibuster on pothole repair. It was a moral imperative. I cited Article 4 of the Convention, which outlines the responsibilities of signatory nations. He ignored me. So I did it again when he started talking about the sewer line on Elm Street. And again, and again. 17 times. I counted. Each time, a concise, fact-based interjection. I wasn't being rude. I was providing crucial context. Histoire de hair. She wasn't just telling me a story. She was reliving her moment of glory. The whole time she's talking, I'm trying to find the angle. There has to be an angle. Nobody gets this worked up about foreign wetlands without a bigger play. My mind kept circling back to the basics. She needed a secure place. She promised a powerful release. The words were right, but the context was insane. It was a cover. It had to be. And then, she said, her voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. After they threw me out, I realized my bag. My messenger bag with all my materials was still in there. The pamphlets, the unredacted NGO reports, the contact lists, everything. I had to get back in, but Gary the gravy-stained goon was blocking the door. I had to create a diversion just to slip past him and grab my stuff. I barely got out before they called the real cops. She finished her tale with a deep, shuddering breath, looking at me with wide, earnest eyes, clearly expecting me to be impressed by her bravery. But I wasn't listening to her story anymore. My brain had snagged on one single, beautiful, clarifying phrase. Had to grab my stuff. It all clicked into place. The frantic energy. The need for a secure location. The talk of pressure and release. The weird, nonsensical cover story about Turkish dams. It was perfect. Classic misdirection. She wasn't an activist. She wasn't a working girl. The unredacted reports and contact lists weren't for a protest. They were for a deal. I finally had it. She was a mule. Okay, she declared, snapping back into focus. I can't waste this opportunity. The momentum from the expulsion is still fresh. I need to channel this righteous indignation into a coherent praxis. She dove for the messenger bag she'd tossed into the sleeper. Praxis. Coherent praxis. My brain translated. Right? Time to prep the product. I watched, feigning disinterest, as she hauled the heavy canvas bag in her lap. She unzipped it and the contents spilled onto the passenger seat. A chaotic mess of pamphlets, rolled up posters, a thermos, and at least a dozen different color highlighter pens. This was her mule kit. The props. Very thorough. Now, the key to effective direct action is understanding the terrain, she muttered, more to herself than to me. She unfurled a ridiculously detailed map of the town and spread it across my entire dashboard, completely covering my speedometer, fuel gauge, and half the windshield. The town square is the theater, the nexus of civic life. We need to control the narrative space. You're covering my gauges, I said, my voice flat. She glanced down, annoyed by the interruption. The flow of information is more important than the flow of diesel for the next hour. Wouldn't you agree? She didn't wait for an answer, instead grabbing a pink highlighter and drawing a thick, aggressive circle around the town square. This is the primary engagement zone. Engagement zone, I thought. So that's where the handoff is happening. The town square. Ballsy. My estimation of her went up a notch. This wasn't some amateur operation. She spent the next 10 minutes in a flurry of activity, turning my clean, functional cab into a mobile command center for a revolution that had an army of one. Papers were taped to the passenger window. Highlighters were uncapped and scattered across the center console. She mumbled a constant stream of activist jargon that was a foreign language to me. We need to amplify the voices of the stakeholders. What are the optics of a sit-in versus a teach-in? Is this intersectional enough? Stakeholders need to shut up so I can hear my engine. My internal monologue grumbled. I was starting to get a headache. The smell of highlighter ink was filling the cab. Then she paused, holding up a small, brightly colored sticker. It showed a cartoon pelican weeping over a cracked riverbed. The text read, "Didam the tigress." She looked around my cab, her eyes scanning for a suitable location. My dash was clean. I keep it that way. No dancing hula girls, no bobbleheads, no political bumper stickers. It's a workspace. Her eyes landed on a perfect 2x3-inch patch of empty black plastic right next to my CB radio mount. Before I could say a word, she peeled the back off the sticker with a flick of her nail and, with a firm press of her thumb, slapped it onto my dashboard. My dashboard. The little weeping pelican stared up at me. The air in the cab seemed to get thick and heavy. A switch flipped in my head. The mild, detached annoyance I'd been feeling curdled into something hot and sharp. This wasn't her space to redecorate. This was an act of colonization. The weeping pelican sticker felt like a tiny, brightly colored tumor growing on my dashboard. It was a violation. My cab is a sealed system, a predictable environment, and she had just introduced a foreign body. I was stewing, my jaw tight, my hands gripping the wheel, even though we were parked. I was on the verge of telling her to take her Mesopotamian sob story and her sticky-backed bird and get the hell out into the rain. I was tired of the jargon, tired of the mess, tired of her. This wasn't worth any amount of money. Just as I was about to open my mouth, her phone buzzed on the cluttered dash. She snatched it up, her screen lighting up her face in the gloom. I glanced over, pretending to check my mirrors. From the corner of my eye, I could see the text message. It was a wall of words, but a few key phrases jumped out, glowing like neon signs in the dark. Drop was a success. The 10 kilos of pure Colombian arrived. My breath caught in my throat. Everything went still. The sound of the rain faded. The stupid pelican faded. The world narrowed to those 7 words. 10 kilos of pure Colombian. She let out a little sigh of relief, tapping out a quick reply. "Oh, thank goodness," she murmured aloud, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred in my brain. Carlos came through. The fair trade coffee for the wake up and smell the injustice sit-in has arrived. I hope he remembered the organic, unbleached filters. But her words were just static. My mind had latched onto the signal and was filtering out all the noise. Coffee, right? That's what they all call it. Nobody just says what it is, not on a text. It's always the paperwork, the pizza, the coffee. I wasn't born yesterday. And Carlos? Come on. It was a perfect, crystalline moment of clarity. The crazy activist routine, the town hall drama, the weeping pelican. It was all an elaborate, beautifully constructed theatrical performance. A cover, and I had a front row seat. A surge of something cold and sharp, like an injection of ice water, went through me. It wasn't fear. It was vindication. I knew it. I knew there was a real hustle under all this nonsense. 10 kilos. That's a serious haul. This woman wasn't just a mule. She was a major player. And here she was in my cab, thinking I was just some dumb trucker. My anger evaporated, replaced by a cool, razor-sharp focus. The game had changed. This was no longer about annoyance. This was about survival. And maybe, just maybe, opportunity. I couldn't just kick her out. Not now that I knew. I had to play this smart. I took a deep breath, relaxed my hands on the wheel, and turned to her with a slow, deliberate smile. It probably looked like a shark trying to look friendly. "You know," I said, my voice smooth and supportive. "The more you talk, the more I think you've got a point about those Huachucalam wetlands." My coffee supply was running low, and my stomach was starting to growl. Playing along with a high-level drug trafficker was mentally exhausting work. We needed a pit stop. I pulled into a Flying J, the big, bright sign, a beacon of greasy salvation in the rainy night. It was busy, rigs idling in the fuel lanes, the smell of diesel and frying bacon hanging in the air. This was my world. Familiar. Orderly. I need coffee and a steak, I announced. You want anything? I suppose I could tolerate some herbal tea, provided it's ethically sourced, she said, as if I were a personal assistant. And perhaps a small salad. No dressing. We slid into a booth at the diner. It was a sea of flannel shirts, worn denim, and tired faces. The low murmur of conversations about dispatchers and four-wheelers was a comfortable hum. A couple of guys I knew from the eye, 80 Run nodded at me from the counter. I nodded back, feeling the easy camaraderie. Then I looked at her, sitting primly on the cracked vinyl, and felt a sudden, sharp sense of disconnect. She was an alien species in this habitat. The waitress, a woman named Barb who looked like she'd been pouring coffee since the invention of the cup, took our order. I got the 16-ounce ribeye, rare, with a loaded baked potato. My passenger interrogated Barb for 5 minutes about the origins of the lettuce before settling on a bowl of dry greens and hot water with a lemon wedge. When the food came, my steak was perfect. A glorious slab of beef sizzling on the plate, a pat of butter melting over the top. It was a beautiful sight. I picked up my knife and fork. "Do you have any idea," she said, her voice loud enough to carry, "what the methane output of a single cow is?" I froze, knife poised over the steak. "No, and right now I don't care." "Well, you should," she declared, pushing her pathetic bowl of leaves aside. She stood up in the booth. "Every single person in this room should care. This slab of exploited muscle tissue on your plate is a symptom of the same systemic ecocidal negligence that is destroying the Tigris-Euphrates basin." The diner went dead silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. The two drivers from the counter were staring right at me, their faces a mixture of pity and disbelief. Barb stood frozen by the coffee machine, pot in hand. My face was burning. I was the center of a very unwelcome circus. "The carbon footprint of this meal," she continued, pointing an accusing finger at my ribeye, "is larger than a round-trip flight from here to Omaha. You are complicity devouring our planet's future." That was it. I threw a $50 bill on the table. "Barb, keep the change." "Sorry about this," I snarled. I grabbed her by the arm hard. She was surprisingly light. I hauled her out of the booth and frog-marched her through the silent, staring diner and out the door into the rain. Back in the cab, the silence was a roaring in my ears. The warmth of the diner, the camaraderie, the simple pleasure of a hot meal, all of it had been poisoned. She hadn't just embarrassed me. She had marked me. In my own world, she had made me an outcast. The game was over. This was no longer about caution or strategy. This was personal. We were back on interstate, the rhythmic thump-thump of the tires on the wet pavement, the only sound in the cab. My hands were clamped so tight on the steering wheel my knuckles were white. I could still feel the burn of a dozen pairs of eyes on my back. The half-eaten steak I'd left behind felt like a personal failure. She, on the other hand, sat there in the passenger seat, radiating an aura of smug satisfaction, as if she'd just won a major debate. "That display of callous apathy back there," she finally said, breaking the silence. "It just proves my point. My tactics have been too localized, too small scale. I need to go to the source of the rot. I need to take this fight to the state capitol." I didn't even look at her. I just kept my eyes on the road. "Good for you. There's a Greyhound station in Springfield. I'll drop you right at the door." "Springfield?" She let out a short, condescending laugh. No, you misunderstand. I can't wait that long. The political iron is hot. I need to strike now. I've been looking at the map on my phone." She paused for dramatic effect. "You need to take me to Jefferson City." The name just hung there in the air. Jefferson City was 180 miles south. A 6-hour detour, round trip, through winding state highways I had no business being on. A logistical and financial impossibility. "No," I said. The word was a piece of granite. "I have a load of refrigerated medical supplies waiting for me in Springfield." I explained, my voice dangerously calm. "My pickup window is in 94 minutes. The reefer unit is set to -10 degrees. The load is time and temperature sensitive. This rig does not go to Jefferson City." End of story. Her face hardened. "Your schedule is a trivial, capitalist construct," she snapped. "We're talking about planetary health. That is the ultimate time-sensitive delivery. Don't you understand what's at stake here? In my head, the translation was immediate. The big bosses are in the capital. That's where the 10 kilos are going. She's trying to make me her getaway driver. The only thing at stake for me, I said, my voice dropping to a low growl, is my job. The answer is no. That's when the waterworks started. It wasn't a slow welling of sadness. It was like a fire hydrant had been opened. Huge, theatrical sobs racked her body. Tears streamed down her face. "How can you be so selfish?" she wailed, her voice cracking with manufactured despair. "I thought you were different. I thought you understood the struggle. You're just another cog in the soul-crushing machine. You don't care about anything but your stupid schedule." I just kept driving, my jaw set like concrete. She was a storm of noise and tears and accusations right next to me, and I was an island of cold, hard refusal. The cab, which had felt like my fortress all my life, now felt like a cage, and we were two animals locked inside, circling each other in a toxic, suffocating silence. The tantrum eventually burned itself out, leaving a black, acrid smoke of resentment in the air. She had turned her body towards the passenger window, presenting me with a rigid, unforgiving shoulder. I was fine with that. I drove on, the silence a welcome relief. My focus narrowed to one thing: getting to the Springfield distribution center on time. We were making good time. The rain had eased up, and I figured I could make my pickup window with about 15 minutes to spare. Close, but manageable. I pulled into a small, independent truck stop just outside the city limits. I needed to top off the reefer fuel and grab my bill of lading from my briefcase. "Stay here," I said. It wasn't a request. I was out of the cab for maybe 3 minutes tops, just long enough to swipe the card at the reefer pump and make sure it started filling. When I climbed back in, she was exactly as I'd left her, a statue of silent protest. I started the engine, ready to cover the last few miles. That's when a small, amber light started blinking on my dash console. Trailer temp warning. My blood went cold. I looked at the digital reefer control unit next to my knee. The green numbers glowed back at me. Set point, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. 40 degrees. The load was supposed to be kept at -10. It had been set to 40 for at least the 3 minutes I was outside, maybe longer. A silent, steady stream of warm air had been pumping into a trailer full of temperature-critical medical supplies. I looked at the blinking light. Then I looked at her. She was still pretending to stare out the window, but I could see the tiny, triumphant smirk reflected in the glass. She'd done it on purpose. Quietly. Deliberately. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was sabotage. A calculated act of spite because a trucker wouldn't throw his career away to chauffeur her to another city for her pet project. She was willing to spoil an entire shipment of medicine, to cost my company and me thousands of dollars, to put a permanent black mark on my record, all to punish me for saying no. Something inside me snapped, not with a bang, but with a quiet, clean break. The anger, the annoyance, the cynical humor, the half-baked theories about her being a drug lord, all of it evaporated. In its place was a perfect, cold, and lucid calm. This was no longer a story I'd tell the guys at the truck stop. This was no longer a matter of getting an unwanted passenger out of my cab. She had declared war. She just didn't realize I was the one who owned the battlefield. I calmly reached down and reset the temperature to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. I didn't say a word. I put the truck in gear, pulled out of the truck stop, and merged back on a highway. She must have thought she'd won. She must have thought I was defeated. But in my head, a single clear thought echoed in the new, profound silence. All right. My turn. The amber warning light on my dash was no longer blinking, but I could still see its ghost burned into my retinas. I drove. The engine hummed its steady, deep-throated song. The tires ate the blacktop. Beside me, she was radiating smugness like a cheap space heater. She thought her little act of sabotage had broken me, that my silence was the sound of a man who had been put in his place. She was wrong. My silence was the sound of factory floor after the 5 o'clock whistle, when all the noisy, inefficient daytime workers have gone home and the quiet, methodical night shift takes over. The part of my brain that had been occupied with annoyance, with disbelief, with analyzing her insane cover story, had gone dark. A different part had come online. A colder, simpler, more ancient piece of machinery. She wasn't a passenger anymore. She was a problem. A piece of hot, unstable cargo that needed to be offloaded. And a good trucker always delivers his cargo to the most appropriate destination. For the first time in hours, I truly saw the road. Every green and white sign wasn't just the name of a town, but a potential tool. Every exit ramp wasn't just a turn-off, but a possible solution. The world outside my windshield had transformed from a simple A to B route into a landscape of opportunity. The rules of hospitality, of common decency, even the unwritten codes of the road, they were all null and void. She had reset the terms of our engagement. When she laid her hands on my reefer controls, she hadn't just threatened my load. She had threatened the fundamental order of my world. And in my world, there are consequences for that. I glanced over at her. She was idly scrolling through her phone, probably reading rave reviews about her performance at the town hall. She was so wrapped up in her own drama, so convinced of her own righteous power, that she couldn't feel the temperature in the cab dropping. She couldn't see that the man behind the wheel was no longer her chauffeur. He was her dispatcher. My load of medicine was going to a warehouse in Springfield. That was a contract. That was business. But the load of my passenger seat, her final destination, was no longer a Greyhound station. Her final manifest had just been rewritten, and I was about to find the perfect loading dock. I took the next exit. It was a wide, sweeping ramp that led onto a dark Tulane State highway heading south. The sign had read, Jefferson City, 178 miles. For a long moment, she didn't seem to notice. Then her head snapped around as she realized we were no longer on the interstate. "What are you doing?" she demanded, a fresh spark of hostility in her voice. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands loose on the wheel. "Taking you to Jefferson City," I said. My voice was flat, empty. A recording. She was stunned into silence for a full 10 seconds. I could feel her staring at the side of my head, try to process this sudden, total capitulation. Finally, she let out a little puff of air, a sound of condescending victory. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with magnanimity, "it's about time you came to your senses. I knew you had it in you. It's never too late to choose the right side of history." She settled back into her seat, a queen reclaiming her throne. "You see, direct action works. It forces people to confront their own complacency." For the next hour, she was insufferable. She gave me a triumphant, blow-by-blow recap of her diner intervention. She talked about the speech she was going to give on the steps of the state capitol, a speech that would surely bring the entire legislature to its knees. I just nodded along, my face a blank mask. "Uh-huh, sure, you tell him." But while she was basking in her victory, my mind was running at 1,000 RPMs. I was hunting. My eyes weren't on the road. They were scanning the darkness beyond my headlights, picking out every detail. A sign for a Century Farm, a hand-painted placard advertising a gun show, a billboard for a megachurch promising salvation. Each one was a potential solution, an option I weighed and discarded. Too simple, not ironic enough, not the perfect fit. I was a craftsman looking for exactly the right tool. My defeat was a performance, and my compliance was a weapon. She thought we were heading for her stage, but I was just looking for the right trapdoor. We came over a rise, and there it was. Not a billboard, not an official sign. It was a cluster of hand-painted plywood signs, all lit by a single, sputtering generator-powered floodlight. They were hammered into the muddy shoulder of the road. Farmers' Freedom Convoy. Rally Point, 2 miles, fairgrounds. No regulaciones, no mandates, no surrender. Jefferson City or bust. My eyes locked onto the signs. A slow, cold smile spread across my face in the darkness of the cab. The first real expression I'd shown in hours. A convoy, a protest, a gathering of loud, angry people who were ready to march on the Capitol. It was exactly what she wanted. It just wasn't her people. The right side of history, she'd said. My internal monologue, quiet for so long, spoke with the simple, final clarity of a dispatcher closing out a ticket. Destination acquired. 2 miles later, The turn-off of the fairgrounds appeared, a muddy track leading into a sprawling, chaotic field. I slowed the Kenworth and made the turn, the big rig groaning as it left the pavement. In the glare of my headlights, a scene from some redneck fever dream unfolded. Dozens of pickup trucks, tractors, and even a few combines were parked haphazardly in the mud. American flags and yellow "Don't Tread on Me" banners snapped in the wind from CB antennas. A large group of men in camouflage jackets and worn-out baseball caps were huddled around a bonfire built in a rusty oil drum, their faces grim. At the center of it all, a burly man with a magnificent beard was standing on a flatbed trailer, barking into a megaphone. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tight with suspicion. "This doesn't look like an official staging area." "It's a convoy," I said, my voice still a placid drone. "They're going to the Capitol. Strength in numbers, right? You people are all about that." I brought the truck to a halt about 50 yards from the main group, bathing them in my high beams. "Look, my phone's lost signal. I don't want to get this rig stuck in the mud. Be a pal, hop out, and ask that fellow with the megaphone what the route is. We could just fall in line with them." She hesitated for a second, then a look of determined purpose hardened her face. "You're right. We need to coordinate, build a coalition. They might be misguided, but they're still the proletariat." She opened the door and hopped down, her expensive shoes sinking into the thick mud. The moment her feet hit the ground, I leaned across the passenger seat. The crowd had turned, squinting into my headlights. Her silhouette was framed perfectly in the glare. "Hey," I bellowed, my voice cutting through the night air. "Hey, fellas, this woman's here to join you. She wants to talk to you all about the urgent need for federal oversight to bring your farming practices in line with the Ramsar Convention on wetlands." The man with the megaphone stopped talking. Every head in the field swiveled towards her. I saw a flicker of confusion on her face, then a dawning, sickening horror as she realized what I'd done. "She says your tractors are a direct threat to the Mesopotamian marshes," I shouted, putting a little extra gravel in my voice. "And she's got a whole plan for regulating your methane output." A low, animal growl started to rise from the crowd. The man with the beard pointed a thick finger at her. "The what?" She was frozen, a deer in the headlights of 100 angry farmers. She looked back at me, her eyes wide with panic. I gave her a small, tight smile, hit the power window switch, and the glass began to hiss upwards. "Go on," I said calmly through the closing gap. "Here's your engagement zone. Go amplify their voices." The window sealed shut with a soft thump, cutting off the sound of the first angry shouts. I hit the lock, put the truck in reverse, and backed out of that muddy field as smoothly as if I were pulling out a company loading dock. I didn't look in my mirrors. Back on the empty state highway, heading north towards Springfield, the quiet of the cab was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. The stupid weeping pelican sticker on my dash caught the light. I peeled it off with my thumbnail, rolled it into a sticky little ball, and flicked it into the ashtray. The cab was mine again. Clean, orderly, sane. She wanted a powerful release, and I gave it to her. I delivered an activist to a protest. A perfect door-to-door hotshot load. Some people live in a world made of theories and hashtags. The rest of us live in a world made of diesel, deadlines, and gravity. And every once in a while, you get the satisfaction of introducing the two.